I think it's important. I think it's always important to have our voice, particularly as community heard. And what you're going to see is that, like, we collaborated with you. We're all trying to tell a different story. But it's very important for the councillors to hear the different viewpoints. You're a filmmaker, Lillian's an artist. Lisa's a part of NYA, but she's also a cultural worker working in the sector. I'm, an executive working in the sector. So I think it's good to hear the different perspectives. I do. I know it's time to do it, but yeah, I think it's good. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah. You'll see how it goes. Yeah, no, I'm going to stay. I'll stay for yours. Yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, if I could, please. We do have quorum. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Councillor Gary Crawford. I'm the Budget Chair for the City of Toronto. And to my left is my colleague, Mike Layton, Councillor Mike Layton, who's on the Budget Committee. I'd like to call this meeting of the Budget Committee, City Hall and North York Civic Centre Consultation meeting to order. This is a series of meetings that we have been having across the City of Toronto on what is happening with regard to the 2019 capital and operating and rate supported budgets. We are working our way through the city. There's 4 locations downtown at City Hall. There's North York, there's Scarborough, and there's Etobicoke that the 2 committees of the Budget Committee have been reaching out to listen to residents. So this is of course, the North York version of that. I'd like to acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the New Credit. You can follow the meeting on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at toronto.ca/council, and all of these sessions are being videotaped. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Interest Act? Seeing none. We have a list of about 26, 27 people at this point who have want to come before us to depute. Councillor Carroll, by the way, who is the local councillor up in North York, one of the 2 or 3 of them will be here shortly. Just want to let everybody know that you have a 5-minute limit for your deputations. There are 2 time clocks on either side of me. Just before 5 minutes, if you haven't finished, I'll give everybody just a little bit of a nudge just to ask you to wrap up. I'm going to try to keep everything to 5 minutes as we have quite a few people. We want to be able to get to everybody in the time allotted before 5 o'clock. So we have about 2 hours. I think we can do that. But again, just understand that if you can keep your comments to 5 minutes, potential of having some questions from one of the councillors on your deputation afterwards. So if, again, and I believe, where are we speaking from? Is it just over here? Oh, so you can go to either side. The mics will be on. And again, and then I will prompt you and we'll start the time. So if there's no other questions from Councillor Layton, no questions, of course? Okay. Why don't we begin with the first deputant, Leila Karim.
Got a little visual to share.
I think we have a tech who will
Okay.
put it into focus for you.
I'm going to begin then. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Budget Committee. My name is Leila Karim, and I am the Executive Director of North York Arts. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and your ongoing support of the arts community in Toronto and to North York Arts to date. North York Arts is a local arts service organization designed to address the needs and interests of artists, arts organizations, and residents in North York by providing arts and cultural programming and services outside the downtown core of Toronto. We work in collaboration with city councillors, the City of Toronto's Culture Division, artists, arts groups, residents, and local businesses. We connect with our sister LASSOs to meet a citywide mandate via the city's culture plans. We provide marketing and promotion support for arts events and programming in North York, plus professional development programs for local artists to help build their capacity. We build public awareness of the vibrancy of arts activities and facilitate partnerships among arts groups throughout Toronto. And we work with diverse organizations that serve newcomers, youth, and senior populations within our community. Since 2011, North York Arts community highlights include 200,000 community members attending and participating in various programs, events, and workshops, 11,000 hours of volunteer community engagement, 842 artists and performers contracted to showcase their work at local community events, and 209 programs, events, and workshops produced, including citywide initiatives. North York Arts has ambitious plans for the next phase of growth. The strategic directions include expanding the arts programming to all wards in North York, supporting and paying more local artists, hosting more community events at satellite venues, and providing increased art services to the neighborhood improvement areas within North York. The social, economic, and city building benefits of the arts sector are paramount to the City of Toronto. The past City of Toronto culture plans since 2001 and the city's strategic action report from 2013 to 2018 clearly notes that investing in the arts will create a more cohesive and innovative city by supporting programs and services that will ensure the city has affordable, sustainable, and diverse cultural spaces, ensuring that all citizens have access to and the opportunity for cultural participation in Toronto, by developing creative clusters and emerging cultural scenes to foster job creation and economic growth. Promoting Toronto as a creative city regionally, nationally, and internationally through our cultural institutions, festivals, and assets, and committing to a sustainable cultural sector and its leadership as a global creative capital. And I know councillors are all aware with this and the vision. However, over the last few years, I've spoken to many newcomer artists, young arts professionals, cultural leaders, and residents. They have described their concerns about the cost of living in Toronto, the overall low wages for cultural workers, the precarious work options due to limited funds for arts organizations, and the lack of affordable live workspaces, and the many barriers to access programming in the city, and that's also from residents as well. So, we still need to do more collaboration, support, and investment in the arts. As you're all aware, as part of the discussion at Arts Day at the city last week, the Friends of the Arts Network are requesting that City Council increase its arts investment by $2 million in 2019. We hope that City Council will continue as champions to increase the investment to the arts to create a vibrant, livable, and equitable city. And finally, at the end of my presentation, I always like to end with a quote from a community member. Arts funding should be a priority for Toronto because it does an immeasurable amount of good for the community and the people who live here. Thank you for your time and for all your support.
Thanks, Lala.
You're welcome.
Councillor Carroll.
So I think we asked this question of another group when we listened to deputations downtown. They talked about the 2 million, and I said across everyone. Is that across Arts Council envelope, local art service organizations, and what about the majors? And it was a bit cloudy. So if there was an increase of 2 million, would you be thinking of increasing the grant envelopes and then you would apply for them, or you need it as core funding?
Well, that's a very good point. My understanding is that it would be across all those different envelopes, so from the city's culture grants to the majors and to the LASSOs and also to TAC. As well, it would be kind of recirculated, if you will, back to ECDEV within their portfolio as well under Mike Williams' team. So it's kind of across the board, is my understanding.
And right now, that really will just help you with inflation in a way, because right now you're flatline, same as last year.
Yes, we as a North York Arts, we got a small increase to help support some of the community programming, and we're still playing catch up. Sorry?
Right.
Yeah, but all the group of 6 of LASSOs, which I was trying to reflect in my one sheet here, we do have a business plan that has been brought forward, and we are, identifying increases to the LASSO portfolio because we recognize that there's more need in all the communities outside the downtown core for arts programming and support.
Right.
And you're right, it's really sticking with the I mean, that's why I really wanted to mention that, the cultural workers in North York and in other areas of Toronto, we're just trying to kind of keep up with what's, should be best practice for artist fees and cultural salaries and everything related to that.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Next
Thank you.
is Jeff Cattell. After Jeff will be Kathy McDonald and Anders Ross.
We are together.
Yeah, so I'm Kathy McDonald with Jeff. I'm co-chair of the Federation of North Toronto Residents Associations, which represents about 30 residents associations in the broad North Toronto area. We have copies of our letter, which Jeff will give to you. Oh, Jeff?
No.
Okay. So we want to address some issues with the planning process and the budget for planning. What we've been seeing as a city is a huge increase in the number of development applications, which seem to take a lot of the planner's time, and there is so little time to get on with the important long-term planning initiatives in secondary plans, avenue studies, and we see the planners going off to hearings at LPAT and trying to meet all the, and TLAB and all the steps required to get there on time. We've also seen recently a change in how preliminary reports are dealt with, which seems to reflect that there's no time to do them. And it's kind of like a fill in the blanks, use standard chunks of information and direct the public to check what the official plan says and what the zoning bylaw says from looking at what's online on the city's website. And as a longtime city planner, it was really difficult for me to even to be able to do something like that. We see this loss of a complete preliminary report, both for residents at the consultation public meetings and for counselors in the looking at preliminary reports at committee as a huge loss. There's a lot of information is missing, and the steps being short-circuited are a problem. Basically, our first recommendation is that council provide funds to allow for additional staff for about 2 years to handle a backlog of development applications and appeals. And this is to allow the staff to get back to their real job of planning the city. Jeff will continue.
So that's the meat and potatoes, the operations, and the issues around the backing up, the backload of work. But in addition, we have comments on, broader comments about city building and the role of the budget in that. As you're all aware, several policies and plans have been developed and approved by City Council in the previous term to respond to the important issues that reflect real needs of Toronto as a caring and forward-thinking community. These include the Ravine Strategy, Transform TO, and the Poverty Strategy. First of all, the Ravine Strategy. We believe there's a basic lack of basic knowledge and understanding about the values of ravines, and especially the threats to the ravines, things like invasive species. The strategy was approved in 2017, but without a significant budget for implementation. It was all about coordination among departments, but no real money being spent on work. So we're recommending that the City Council should ask the General Manager of Parks, Forest and Recreation to report to the I&E Committee on implementation plans for 2019 that would reflect actually some specific plans and proposals for dealing with key issues. Secondly, Transform TO. Toronto's Climate Action Plan identifies how we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, improve our health, grow the economy, and improve social equity. And again, in 2017, City Council unanimously approved a set of long-term low-carbon goals and strategies. However, the funding allocated is way below what is required for planned implementation. It's critically important that for our children and our grandchildren, as well as ourselves, that the city take climate action steps required. Thirdly, the Toronto Poverty Action Strategy is a 20-year plan that was unanimously approved by Council in 2015. 17 recommendations. One of the things like community benefits framework, a key way of getting people into the labor force who are sitting out there looking for a step forward. It's not moving. So basically the recommendations, a general one that City Council follow through with funding for implementation of several previously approved major strategies. And then lastly, about revenues. We recognize that programs need to be funded and funds need to be responsibly sourced. We remain concerned about the need to address the longer-term finances of the city. It looks like there's some shuffling of funds between capital and operating, but no real measures to look at the long-term implications of the budget. The way the previous city manager advised council on that several times. The current approach is a short-term measure that fails to address the long-term needs. But we believe that revenue measures should be assessed not just from a financial perspective or for their ease of administration, but also for their contribution, positive or negative, to city building. In other words, do they align with official plan objectives, such as building a city that reduces the need for travel, that encourages true mixed-use development, that is transit, walking, and biking friendly, that is green, and is equitable for all its residents. For example, the water runoff charge that penalizes those with large areas of impervious paving. Why don't we move forward with an idea like that? So we recommend that City Council ensure that contribution to city building is a key consideration in its consideration of revenue tools. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Carroll, then Lee.
Yes, a question, I guess, is for Ms. McDonald more than anything. There is some enhancement cost recovery positions in planning. I was just looking back because I couldn't remember. But it's not really around backlog. It's more around very specific initiatives, the Midtown in Focus, chief among them. But you think we're gonna hit a wall if we don't have people just processing applications?
We've already hit the wall.
Well, I will admit that I don't like to unlock my office door in the morning for fear of another application coming through it. You really think, in your experience, it looks as if we have hit the wall?
Yes, because there are very few staff resources to deal with the basic business of planning that is being, it just takes too long to get secondary plans done. I live in the Deer Park area, and it's taken the staff almost over a year to get to start work on our secondary plan, and at this point we have two major applications in front of us and one more coming. And we said 2 years ago we need a new plan so we can look at these properly, and it's now we're trying to sort of cobble something together, but
playing
yeah.
catch up to
it's very much a catch up and not a comprehensive process that we really need to have to consider how these applications affect the area around the intersections of intersection of Yonge and St. Clair, which is a bottleneck to start out with. So, and we have the issue of the Yonge subway capacity issue as well.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Thank you. On that planning issue, were you aware that last week at Budget Committee there was a request for a briefing note on specifically what it would take to catch up on our HCDs, and it failed?
That's good news. No, I don't think we were aware of that.
Not good news. The motion failed. We won't be getting that information heading into the final budget.
Yeah, because the big thing coming down the road is the citywide survey of heritage, which we need people to get behind in order to. We're changing things so quickly that we don't have time to find out what it is we're affecting, and we need that survey of heritage to go alongside in local HCD studies.
Now, I didn't see your note. I haven't had time to read through the note, but in the ravine section, were you aware that the city's, is it canceling or not making the additional investment in ravine litter pickup? Let alone invasive species, our stormwater infrastructure. We're not even going to pick up litter anymore from those big ravines. Were you aware that that was part of it?
No, I understand a report is coming back to council this spring, and hopefully we'll have some of that information. But the issue with ravines was that even in 2017, when the report got approved, the staff had not made a fulsome implementation plan. It was really just, here's what's happening, but there was no moving forward.
It looks like it's going to be a big fight next year for the whole ravine strategy. But for now, this budget is actually seeing a reduction in investment in ravines, and in particular, how beautiful they look from garbage just that kind of ends up down in the ravines. So I hope that what we see in our next budget cycle is a much more significant investment if we're not able to achieve it in this one.
Thank you. Next is Anders Ross, and then after Anders will be Mary Hines.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anders Ross. I'm a member of the Bathurst and Finch Social Action Committee, and I live in Ward 6, which is Councillor Pasternak's riding. I feel we need desperately to redefine what is affordable housing in the City of Toronto in 2019. 47% of Torontonians rent the homes they live in. When my parents first came here in 1952, that was less than 17%. The vacancy rate is less than 1%. A healthy rental market needs 3 to 5% vacancy. When my parents came here in the 50s, it was 7 to 9%. And average rent for units that were built prior to 2017 are $1,426 a month. That's for one bedroom. I'm grateful enough that I live in a private-public partnership development at 625 Finch West, where we're getting a 3-bedroom for less than that. But we need more of that. And also, the other thing that's coming up is the condo market. A lot of people are renting out condo units, and the rent for that is also, on average, $1,803 a month. Now, what's happening to this market is what's called renoviction, where a property owner will just come along and say, hey, I want to renovate the unit. I'm terminating your lease, goodbye. Once that happens, they can charge whatever they want on the private market, and there's no protection with the Landlord-Tenant Act. There's no protection for the tenant or recourse. Now, the one thing I want to also bring up that affects rental is rezoning of property. I think the City of Toronto could do a better job on rezoning property that was previously industrial and is now being regentrified. And my area is really impacted by this. I live 10 minutes away from Finch West Station, but because this area is industrial commercial, you won't see a single crane building affordable housing or geared to income housing, and that is a crime. One of the reasons why we lost Amazon's HQ relocation was the lack of affordable housing for their staff. They just thought that the cost of subsidizing the housing costs for their staff would outlay their bottom line. So are we going to continue to be on the losing side of things, or are we going to take change? Like, we cannot be a modern 21st century city with 18th century attitudes. And it seems that my whole life has consisted of one form of struggle or hardship, whether it was fighting for employment supports like you think, or overcoming a huge student debt burden, which I still have not tackled yet. But the one thing that really bites me is that I'm still living at home with my parents. I'm 40, they're not. I'm single, I'm dependentless, and I represent 37% of the city's population that's going untapped. The potential is not being utilized. So in repose, I'll close on this note. The mayor, I'll laud him for having a goal. It's 40,000 units that are going to be deemed affordable rental units that he's going to build in 12 years. Not enough. I don't think it's enough, and neither should you.
Thank you. Questions? Okay. Next is Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anders. Mary Hines. Welcome, Mary.
Hello.
I am a North York resident. I have been a North York resident for over 40 years. In fact, almost all of my time in Canada. I've been here before, many times. I'm a repeat offender. I'm one of the people who come here again and again. I ask you to raise my taxes. I ask you to create transitional and assisted living housing. I ask you to fulfill your promises with the poverty reduction strategy, transform TO, the cycling network plan. I could use my entire time just listing the strategies that are way too slowly eking their way barely forward. Once again, I am here, not to beg, not to say please, but to demand. Stop creating strategies with lofty goals and little money. Stop making 10-year plans with grandiose hopes for real funding way down the road. And most of all, stop raising fees for recreational services beyond the rate you use for the operation and capital budget. Stop throwing away money for a one-stop extension of the Bloor line way up into Scarborough. Stop wandering through a multitude of subway plans for Scarborough. A proper plan for transit for all Toronto was created in 2010. Implement Transit City now. The inner suburbs deserve better. You need money. Yes, implement the taxes you can under the City of Toronto Act. Do not rebuild the Gardner, and the property tax base rate can go higher. A history lesson. 2001, the tax rate was 5%. 2002, 4.3%. 2003 to 2006, 3%. 2007, 3.8%. 2008, 3.75. 2009, 4, and then the years too horrible to recall. Raise the tax rate, but also protect the low-income homeowners. Add to the provisions for the elderly and the disabled. Despite the majority of council also being repeat offenders, council has the opportunity to be reborn, to rise from the devastation. Our city has been bloodied, but we must remain unbowed. We can take this opportunity to demonstrate we can have a just and fair city, so very different from what the province has become. Use this opportunity to increase and better distribute our taxes. Money for supportive housing, money for Vision Zero, money for health services, and a Scarborough or LRT. Not a useless subway, not a renewed Gardner. We can do better, and we must. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Ryan oh, sorry, Councillor Carroll.
Quick question. You mentioned a number of strategies at the beginning, Transform TO, like the bike strategy and one other. And the poverty reduction strategy. You're aware that none of them is going to be funded to where they should be in this particular year?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the whole point of being here.
Mary, I think although you don't live in my ward, I think you're one of my e-blast followers.
Yes, I am.
So would you be surprised to know, I get the feedback and it's sent back to me, the staff review all of the feedback forms. You know that I wrote one saying that if you want us to not end up with a $3 billion backlog in road repair and not a single trail, bridge, or pathway that isn't in catastrophic state of repair 10 years from now, if you'd like to avoid that, that we could simply add 1% to inflation every year for 3 years and catch the base up. You're aware that I sent that out to 4,000 people in my community?
I'm aware you sent it out. I didn't know the exact number, of course.
So here's a representative answer, and I wonder if you wanted to comment on it. Shelley, I'm so sorry I won't be able to attend your budget town hall. But can this email speak for me? That raising our taxes just a bit makes so much more sense than our city falling apart? That doesn't surprise you as a response?
That's a wonderful response. I'm actually surprised because I know that there tends to be a thought that people do not want their taxes raised, and I think there are a lot of people who would be very willing to have their taxes raised. As you know, I've gone door to door, and I have talked to people, and very often when you explain to people what their taxes buy for them, they're very much in favor of a tax increase. But we must also protect the people who cannot pay the increase immediately. So because right now, all we protect are the disabled or the people who are seniors, and we must increase that to people who are low income, but not in those two categories.
Right. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ryan Willis.
Hello, my name is Ryan Willis. I am the recording secretary for the QP Local 416 Paramedic Services Unit. I have 8 family members who reside in Toronto. I grew up in Toronto, and 3 of my family members are currently over the age of 70, and I will explain the relevance of that age parameter in a minute. I have 25 years of service with the City of Toronto. 5 of those were part-time years with Parks and Recreation, and 20 have been full-time with paramedic services. I'm here today to request an increase in the budget for paramedic services to allow for significant staffing increases to meet the daily unmanageable demand paramedic services are facing. Hello and thank you. I first also have to say that I thank you all for your service to the city. Like myself, I think we all want a strong public service, and I truly love my job. Like most of my colleagues, I would probably do it for free. However, it has been harder and harder to like my job lately, and it feels like I'm working in anything but a strong public service. There is no debate that paramedic services are an integral part of city and healthcare infrastructure. Yet it seems like we are always asking for support. I've worked through lots of efficiency measures in my 20 years in paramedic services. To use a metaphor, there eventually comes a point where you can't simply drive a car going 180 kilometers an hour efficiently anymore. At some point, someone has told the city that hiring part-time paramedics was a good efficiency. Part-time paramedics have little, if nothing, to do with improving service delivery. They are about cost savings, pure and simple, with the added detraction that part-time paramedics cannot work as much as full-time paramedics. In a rural service with a surge population like Muskoka, part-time paramedics may make sense. However, in the City of Toronto, where the call volume is measured in the hundreds of thousands, we have a workforce that represents a supply much, much lower than the demand. These part-time paramedics work near full-time hours, swing across the entire geography of the city, and have shifts canceled on them in a whim. The work life of a full-time paramedic, that's me, is slightly better than that, in that some are assigned to work locations. I'm lucky enough to be one of those people. In my 12-hour shift, which usually lasts for 13 hours consecutively without a break, I will assess, treat at least 6 to 8 patients. Most of these patients are over the age of 70, which has already been studied over and over again. Most recently with the POMAX report of 2013, noted that 30% of residents in the City of Toronto over the age of 70 will use paramedic services at least once per year, and that number continues to grow. We will see a lot of patients with mental health issues. We will assess and diagnose in the field heart attacks and strokes. We will see unconscious people found by bystanders who we will investigate and assess if they are opiate overdoses. We will respond to several calls received from Toronto Police Services that have no information that there's a patient there at all. And the fact that we will respond to a call for someone screaming in the hallway, and police simply tell us they have no one to send. They send us instead. We will attend for an elderly patient that fell on the floor hours ago, but has been deferred due to low ambulance availability. Paramedic services can have a tremendously positive impact on the people of Toronto and the healthcare system at large. I know because I've seen the benefits for myself with the thousands of patients I will see in a year, and because both my grandparents, who are longtime residents of the City of Toronto, have used them themselves. Please support paramedics and the public by building a strong public service which has a proven value. Support paramedics by increasing staffing proportionate to demand. Please convert the 200 part-time paramedics to full-time immediately and hire at least 100 full-time paramedics to meet demand as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much, Ryan. I asked this of a paramedic who gave a deputation at City Hall. Is there a measure, or none of us are experts in emergency response for paramedics, police, or fire, or otherwise?
Fair enough.
Is there a measure we should be looking for, a benchmark we can compare ourselves against to see how we're performing versus other major municipalities, or a recommended benchmark that an industry association would use?
The industry benchmark was prescribed in the Ambulance Act and across the Ministry of Health. It used to be the benchmark of 8:59 to all life-threatening emergencies, so that's 8 minutes and 59 seconds to all life-threatening emergencies. However, that number has been kind of, as you can see in the if you review the POMAX report, it really is kind of arbitrary and doesn't really get down to what an actual good response time is for a life-threatening emergency versus a non-life-threatening emergency. The Ambulance Act has subsequently changed so that each individual service provider can set their own benchmarks. Right now, I think, and don't quote me, I think Toronto Paramedic Services uses 11 minutes response time to a life-threatening emergency at least 75% of the time. Again, you'll have to check with city staff to confirm that, but off the top of my head, that's the number that rings. And right now, we have less, I think we need to focus less on a response time as a benchmark, which has been the history of the industry standard, and more on unit availability. When you have a good unit availability in which there's a threshold number that ambulances don't dip below, the city functions well. The efficiencies work properly. But the minute you start dipping below that threshold, we are now holding calls. We're now delaying responses. We're now asking paramedics to stop their paperwork halfway through so they can go out and jump on the next call. And we're really kind of, the wheels are falling off the wagon at that point. So I think if you're asking in terms of an industry standard, I think you need to investigate the threshold of unit availability.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilor Carroll?
We have had, at our other meeting, it was a full-time paramedic who came forward as well. Do they have an organization of their own, or are they just working within the same labor organization as the full-timers? Because I'm surprised that they're not coming forward when it would appear, when you say 200, many of those are working up to full-time hours. They're not getting any benefits at all, are they?
They're getting 14% in lieu of benefits, and they are represented by QP Local 416.
Ah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Christina Fernandez.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There's a wise saying, breakfast is most important meal of the day. It is true, yet some can't afford to provide such a meal. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Fernandez. I'm a lunchroom supervisor in St. Pascal Baylon Elementary School, a soon-to-be a student nutrition program coordinator, and mostly importantly, a mother of 17-year-old daughter. I've been part of the St. Pascal Baylon community for past 10 years now. In the last 9 years, I have grown accustomed to relying on the snack program that is generously funded by the City of Toronto and the Province of Ontario. Along with parental contribution and smart shopping, my daughter studied in St. Pascal Baylon School since grade 3. She is now attending St. Joseph Morrow Park Catholic Secondary School and is in her last year. The snack program has been extremely beneficial for my family when it became financially difficult to provide ever so often. When my daughter was in elementary school, she relied heavily on the snack program during the day to keep her energy up. They were also healthy snacks and didn't cost as much as a junk food would. Now that she is in high school and her schedule is different, she doesn't have time to make breakfast in the morning and just simply heads to school on an empty stomach. However, when she does arrive at school, every morning there's free breakfast similar to the snack program, which provides her with a healthy alternative than buying something from Tim Horton on her way to school. Parents in our community do enjoy the snack program due to how accessible and convenient it is. Many families struggle to meet ends and sometimes do not have time or money to provide for their children with a big healthy breakfast. The snack program allows those families to breathe a little easier when it comes to their financial situations, as they are aware their child is being fed at school. It promotes healthy eating and teaches the children to make better decisions when it comes to their eating habits. Continue to fund this program will benefit low-income families, however, certainly of whether the free program will be continued or not makes it harder for families to find last-minute means to help provide for their children. The snack program has made an extraordinary impact in our school community. It has provided a lot of students with healthy alternatives and food for the soul. It definitely has made it easier for many families, and we are grateful for that. We thank you for your generosity this far, and we hope you continue to fund this program. My special thanks to City of Toronto for helping to fund this program. And now I end my speech with a quote Dr. Rand Olson says, "Among the most sacred gifts you can give your child is a gift of health. This gift is best given by you." Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none? Thank you very much. Next is Milian Kung, or Kung.
Doesn't quite work. It's okay. We'll just get started. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Milian Kung, and I am president of the North York Visual Artists. I am also a member of the board of directors for the North York Arts. In partnership, we have participated in a number of exciting projects. Several years ago, we connected with youth in the Bathurst Finch area. With a grant from Cultural Hotspot, we created a community quilt using wooden panels, paint, clay, and glass. This quilt is currently installed at the Bathurst Finch Hub. The youth enjoyed these activities and wanted more. So, with the remaining funds and materials, we organized another session where they were able to create smaller items to take home, and there are some samples. Following that, we worked with New Canadians in the Jane and Shepherd area. Here, they were able to work with glass and with clay to create wonderful personal items that they could take with them. From this experience, we have learned that teenagers and New Canadians have the same needs. Along with the excitement and the anticipation of a new situation, there are the fears, the worries, and the anxieties that come with a new stage in one's life. Imagine moving to a new school, a home, a city, or even a new country. Our immediate impulse is to find people with whom we can relate and bond. Through the arts, there is a common bond, one in which we can create a welcoming environment and with a sense of belonging, and this is one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I remember a 14-year-old coming to me after a few sessions and saying, "I feel much calmer when I do arts." Another teenager commented, "I enjoy making new friends." Imagine the joy when a New Canadian shares his ideas and some of his creative skills with others in the room during a project. 2018 was a year of violence, which included the Yonge Street van attack and the Danforth shooting. In the aftermath, the city came together and expressed solidarity with messages of love and togetherness. Far too often, we encountered issues of mental health and isolation in our society. With the increase in technology, how are we able to express our wants, our needs, and our feelings? As a school principal, time and again, I saw how the arts benefited the individual and drew a community together. The arts facilitate social interaction. They improve one's health by reducing anxiety and isolation, thereby boosting self-confidence. The arts break down many boundaries. Studies have shown that the arts transcend poverty, race, and religion. Through common media, we express our hopes, our fears, and the beauty in life. Through the arts, we improve communication and foster understanding. There are many benefits to funding the arts in Toronto. I ask that we be proactive rather than reactive. Thank you, and if you want, you can see the samples later.
So Carol, no, you're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Ellen McCartney.
Good afternoon. I am Alan McCartney of Ward 15, Don Valley West, presided by Councillor Jay Robinson. I extend my appreciation to the Budget Committee for the opportunity to speak today. Torontonians are reminded of a tax increase equal to or less than the rate of inflation. An increase greater than the rate of inflation cannot be ruled out. Revenue tools have been abandoned. The status quo is not acceptable. The proposed budget either spreads the same or lesser funds over an extended period of time, proposes cuts in unknown areas, or proposes cuts to the TDC. The result is reduced investment in social components in favor of a balanced budget. Toronto City Council has provided hundreds of millions of dollars in property tax breaks to developers for constructing commercial and industrial facilities. This results in reduced revenue for investment in the social safety net for Toronto. Public value in these financial incentives is unclear. John Tory's Housing Now initiative was passed with a significant majority of Toronto City Council to be accompanied with financial incentives for developers in exchange for affordable rents. The elimination of rent controls by Ontario for new rental units means that units built under the Housing Now initiative will not be protected. Shelters represent inhumane treatment of citizens as they live in cramped conditions where communicable diseases exist. Replacement of shelters with affordable housing will fulfill a human right. The use of shuttle buses during subway service disruptions creates additional crowding and delays. Frozen budgets or reduced funds for an increasing population that relies on essential services increase stress. Stress has a debilitating effect on human health. Input from citizens necessitates acknowledgement of each input and an aggressive support of the following commitments. A tax increase greater than the rate of inflation is necessary. Utilize revenue tools. Abandon the use of shelters. Support Councillor Layton's proposal for 50% of new units be affordable. Support Councillor Matlow's proposal for city-imposed rent controls. Insist on upgrades for Toronto community housing to prevent shuttering of occupancies. Insist that homelessness be in the forefront for affordable housing during all seasons, not just in the winter. Abandon unnecessarily expensive repairs of the Gardiner Expressway. Abandon the outrageously expensive Scarborough subway extension. Abandon Smart Track. Do not submit to the demands for transit of municipalities outside Toronto. Insist on progressive and revolutionary advancements of rapid transit for all geographical areas of Toronto. Recognize the opinions of transit professionals. Increase childcare subsidies. Increase the rate of creation of recreation spaces for a period less than 5 years. Increase funding for youth programs in view of a significant increase in homicides. Progressive advancements in long-term home care as we have an aging population. Include improvement to Wheel-Trans in a proactive manner as opposed to perpetual discussions. Recognize the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act for improvements to accommodate people with disabilities. Control redevelopment to prevent developers from seizing control of Toronto lands. In conclusion, I recommend that the Budget Committee adhere to the above commitments for much needed investments without dismissiveness of principles and Torontonians in the interest of all citizens whom you purport to serve. You will note that the above stresses investment in people as opposed to the generation of revenue and the support of excessive redevelopment. You should also note that your responsibility must be directed towards Torontonians, not to municipalities outside Toronto. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity afforded by the committee for this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next is Melissa Foster.
I have my own tech crew today. Thanks. Hello, my name is Melissa Foster, and I am the Program and Outreach Director for North York Arts. I know that you have just heard from my colleague, Lila Kareem, a little while ago, but now I'd just like to talk a little bit more specifically about the impact that city funds have had on residents, particularly youth in North York. It's well documented that the arts have the ability to play a crucial role in community development and youth engagement. Key documents like the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy and the Toronto Vital Signs Report both note that recreation and the arts is a key component to social development, and that neighborhoods outside the downtown core lack the localized resources. Just recently, I attended a forum on gang violence and spoke to a former Toronto gang member who said recreation and the arts in particular is so vital to giving young people a voice and the courage to use that voice. As we see the rise of violence in the city, I hope that we can continue to see the increasing value of the arts as a tool for social inclusion for all communities. With arts funding from the City of Toronto, North York Arts has been able to provide programs for youth in key neighborhood improvement areas. I'd like to talk about one in particular today, our dance mentorship and training program. For the last 4 years, we've worked with a group of young girls building a dance program that has ended up transitioning into a youth-led dance squad. Having the ability to watch these young people grow over the past 4 years and hearing their experiences about living in areas of increasing violence and instability is quite something. This program has had many impacts, but I'd like to highlight the impacts that the participants have identified for themselves. These are going to be direct quotes from 3 participants from the ages of 12 to 15 living in Toronto community housing and in areas of high rates of gun violence and gang recruitment. Participant 1, dance has changed me as a person because ever since I started dancing, I have the courage that I can go out and do anything. When you perform in front of many people, it helps you outside. Since I can do that, I can ace this job interview or anything. I think that what we learn from dance goes into everyday life. When you're in a new dance group, you feel shy to dance in front of people. It gives you more confidence, and when you're around people in school, you don't feel shy, you don't pull away and be quiet. To dance helps me to remember stuff, helps my memory, and when I'm at school, it helps me remember things in school. To remember certain steps in math questions, it makes my memory sharper. Participant 2, in dance we come together as a team. We can make each other's day better. There's no I in team. When someone's not doing something right, when they're not doing the right move, we let them know, and then we cheer them on. Because when you have people you love cheering you on, it brightens your mood. So we work harder and we give more. Participant 3, dance changed me. Before I started dancing, I felt like I had a lot of anger inside me. Now I know dance is a way to control my anger. If I'm angry, I'll dance. It gets me into a better mood. So dance helps me with the problems I used to have. Dance means everything to me because it makes me feel free and I can conquer the world. Because if I don't dance, all my anger and attitude builds up inside me. And when I dance, I can be happy. With arts funding from the City of Toronto and other short-term project funds, this is what we've collectively achieved. However, some significant challenges still occur. Year to year, we don't know if we can continue this program. Short-term funding, year-to-year funding, makes it difficult to plan ahead. It makes it particularly difficult to build a program that's going to deepen the impact. So in the future, I would really like to see that we're working more collaboratively with other sectors of the City of Toronto to create a network of supports and build funded multi-year programs that continue to grow as we watch our communities grow.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. Just out of curiosity, is the cost of delivering your programs getting less expensive?
No.
Are costs increasing?
I would say, I think that there is some sort of a little bit more of a motion towards collaboration, which does mean that certain things like access to venue space and workshop space is maybe a little bit easier as long as we've already done that work to build those partnerships. But you know, we're looking at artist fees, and with the cost of living go up, we have to look at that as well. So I think the big thing with that is that we want to be able to pay our artists well. And there's more and more emphasis on that, as there should be, which means that our programs are going to rise in cost as the rises in costs, or the cost of living and costs in Toronto in general continue to increase.
So do you have a plan to scale back the activities that you do as a result of the city's budget being flatlined this year?
Our plan is to try and raise funds in many different ways. So one of the things that we're doing is we are trying to streamline programming, but not necessarily scale back in terms of what we're delivering for the communities. It's a little bit of a hybrid of things. Streamlining also means that we're increasing our collaboration to try and build resources with other places, but it's really hard to say that when you've been delivering certain programs to a community and then to all of a sudden just walk out on them can be really devastating. So we're just trying to find other resources to make it happen.
Do you think if we flatlined the arts grant funding budget for any duration of time, that would impact the level of service that you can provide?
Absolutely. We wouldn't be able to grow at all, like not even an inch.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Scott Oakman.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for providing me with the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Scott Oakman. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer of the Greater Toronto Hockey League. I also want to thank everybody else that's actually spoken already. It's amazing to hear all the great things that happen within the City of Toronto and all the great work that everybody does. I'm here today to not ask for money, which is probably nice. Yeah, and I'm actually not even here to ask for a reduction in the proposed fees for ice user rates. What I'd like to first of all tell you about the Greater Toronto Hockey League, we were established in 1911 as the Toronto Hockey League back then. We've grown to encompass the jurisdiction of the City of Toronto, City of Mississauga, City of Markham, and City of Vaughan. We have over 40,000 registered participants that register in our organization annually. Approximately 16,000 of them are City of Toronto residents. And we're probably best known for our competitive hockey, and unfortunately that's probably not the best work that our organizations do. We have over 30 house league organizations that serve local communities to provide hockey opportunities for kids and in their community directly. And what I'd like to actually raise with you today is just how the budget is implemented when it comes to ice permits. First of all, I think it's safe to say, I know as a league we spend over $1.4 million on ice a year for our competitive hockey program. It's safe to say our house league programs collectively would spend several times that in a year. So given the way that the proposed budget changes are being implemented would make a large portion of them retroactive to January 1st. And the challenge with that, when we have organizations that serve 200 community hockey players and they set their budget out at the start of the year, they only collect funds for the current hockey season. So they have contracts that go until April, but now are being asked to pay 4.07% retroactive to January 1st. And that's a real challenge for those small communities, as with any. When not-for-profits are planning their budget, they do so in a way that they only charge the parents and families what they need to collect. So having the budget implemented in that way is a real challenge. What I'd like to do, or what I would like the committee to consider, is having the changes effective April 1st or May 1st in calendar years, and recommend that on a go-forward basis. The budget for ice permits be implemented in that fashion. I do know the board-operated arenas implement their budget changes in that way, and that allows the local hockey organizations that are using those facilities to properly plan and only charge families what they need to collect. The other thing that I'd like to ask the Budget Committee to do, if it's within your authority, is consider asking for a review of the operation of city-run ice facilities and compare them to the operation of board-managed facilities. I think it's safe to say that, in our experience, the better operated facilities are those that have a board of management. They are in better condition, they are maintained better, and they are used to a much fuller capacity. And from the outside looking in, I would suggest that's because you have one person who's in charge of operating that arena, and they're tasked with making sure they meet budget every year, and so they're out selling the ice to other user groups as opposed to waiting for somebody to contact the permit office and see what ice might be available. So I think there would be some real value in finding out how much usage those facilities get versus other municipal city-operated facilities. I would also like the Budget Committee, again, if it's within your mandate, to suggest that a user group organization be formed to meet regularly with city staff, to have an ongoing dialogue about the way ice is allocated and the way the ice is used. I do know other municipalities have had these types of user group discussion groups, and they've been very effective in having the groups work together in sharing ice, allocating ice, finding more efficient ways of doing it. So again, I'm not sure if the Budget Committee can make that type of recommendation, but we strongly believe there's value in having all users of ice have a collective discussion with city staff about how that ice is used. Finally, I'd just like to toot our own horn. I know our organization over the years has had a rocky relationship sometimes with the City of Toronto, and I hope over the last number of years we've worked really hard. We've worked directly with a number of councillors to mend those relationships, and we're really proud about where our organization is going. We've got relationships currently built with a number of community organizations in the Lawrence Heights area, Variety Village, etc. And in the fall of this year, we're actually hosting a summit and town hall about the game of hockey that will have international flavor. And the three themes of it will be fixing the culture of the game of hockey while making it more inclusive and more diversive. And we welcome the city to join us in that, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you. I think both of us were just discussing the same thing, because you raise a really interesting and important point of when budgets, like what the budget cycle looks like. I think you could see the challenge that if we raised it the stated amount that we would raise it in April, we would miss a significant amount of revenue that Parks is putting in to balance their budget or the overall city budget. And it struck me that if what we could build in is an increase that had some certainty, that would probably go over well, even if it was a bit more for next year, but knowing that you're not then going to halfway through the year have to change your rates.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because the organizations can then plan accordingly. I mean, in an ideal world, the majority of our organization's fiscal cycle is May 1 to April 30, because that's generally when the hockey season operates. So that's how they set their budgets, so that they're only collecting money from the users who are actually using the facilities. But I also understand that doesn't mesh with the city's budget cycle.
Well, I also every day that I head into City Hall, I see a giant sign up for TP baseball at Christie Pitts, and they're all already signing kids up, meaning they already have their rates posted.
Correct. And
like they're looking at changing those probably partway through the year, unless they adjusted theirs to inflation. So I think we can probably find a solution around it. It's just, do you get double the rate increase this year to anticipate that that's what they're going to need to recover in the January portion of next year in order to balance things out? I don't know.
Yeah, I certainly understand that dilemma, and it may not be something that can be addressed during this budget cycle, but perhaps on a go-forward basis when the budgets are being established, if that could be a consideration when that is done, understanding that there probably would have to be a higher increase effective April 1 or May 1, but at least the organizations are then collecting the money based on knowing what they need.
let's bring that one back to, and I think that's probably something we can bring back to city staff to figure out how they can implement it properly.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Carroll.
Question? For a guy who wasn't asking for any money, you sure generated a lot of questions. So, you know, if we ended up having to fill a funding gap of some sort, if there are two ways to really address this. An inflationary increase at this point can be expected because that's been our user fee policy going along. But the struggle you've had is that you're in a basket of services that Parks and Rec does, where they're trying to get to a cost recovery model, and that's the tough part. So if we were able to find a way to fill the gap from now until April, and then have you on an April calendar, that helps a number of sports, really, I would imagine, not just hockey. But we would have to deal with this first year. If we did that, just by having you on a different financial year, if you will, does that really get us to the point where now the problem is easier to manage because the rate changes, people then start to sell their fall terms, then fill out their business plans?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we could one way of handling it would be, as Councillor Layton suggests, is we're going to start in April with a higher increase, then you're self-funding the change. If we found a way to fund the change, we could then carry on with the cost recovery model from there. The other question I would ask then, if we were going to have that discussion, it means we really should be sitting down with the users, which is the other concept that you suggested. That really needs to happen. If we're going to do that, you're really talking about something that is pre-budget launch, pre-everything. Just sit down and let's actually have this conversation with not only park staff, but I would think finance staff, to really understand what is the policy and where are we going with this. That's what you're really asking, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think there needs to be more dialogue between the users, and I'm sure other user groups that are using fields, et cetera, probably feel the same way, that there's an opportunity to plan change, coordinate change, and that there's an ongoing dialogue. I mean, we're all working to create opportunities for kids in Toronto to have sport opportunities, and I think that dialogue would be very important in achieving that in an efficient way.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Amy O'Neill. Amy O'Neill. Okay, next is Ronnie Yaron.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name's Ronnie Yaron. I've been a resident of St. Lawrence neighborhood for 40 years. Though we are situated on a landfill and a floodplain, actually, but thankfully there has never been a flood in our area. Yet there are floods all over the city, resulting in great damage to homes and office buildings, roads, and even at Union Station. I know I'm not the first to say that the 2019 preliminary budget fails to take the bold action Toronto needs to deal with climate impacts. As we have seen, the city is often unprepared for the burst water pipes, overflowing sewers, power outages, and all kinds of outdated infrastructure. These disasters affect everyone, regardless of social class. Whether these occurrences are due to man-made climate change or other reasons, the fact is they are happening with great frequency and costing the city millions of dollars. For instance, the Alberta floods in 2013 displaced 100,000 people, and total damage exceeded $5 billion. So I ask, what does it take to persuade City Council to invest under $1,500,000 this year for Transform TO, the climate action plan passed by the city in 2017? In 2017, according to the Environmental Commissioner, insurance claims due to natural disasters in Canada cost about $1 billion. Severe weather is not going away, whether we believe it is caused by climate change or not. There are some basic actions which are called for by Transform TO, such as installing backup power in buildings, retrofitting buildings, and other energy conservation measures in order to prevent major damage and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I am very aware of the hundreds of competing demands being made on you as city councilors and the funding restraints imposed on you at the same time. Yet this is a false predicament. It is within the power of city council to raise property tax, to reintroduce the vehicle registration tax, which I understand was worth $69 million, which is equal to more than 2% property tax increase. Parking fees and other source, and other revenue tools that do not require provincial government permission. As this is only a preliminary budget, you still have the opportunity to vote for these tools. City Council owes it to the people of Toronto to fund the strategies which it has passed in the last few years, of which Transform TO is one. And all of these are worth definitely at least getting the amount that was designated. Something that gives me hope are the young people in their teens coming out for a rally the first Friday of each month at Queen's Park at 12:30 to speak out for climate change, for climate action, rather, inspired by Greta Thunberg. She's a 15-year-old Swedish climate activist. If you have never heard her speak, I suggest, or I recommend highly that you do so. She's on the YouTube, all kinds of speeches she's given. These young people that come out to Queen's Park, they don't mince words and they are not soft-spoken. They speak truth to power. It's worth coming out to hear them. The next opportunity will be Friday, March the 1st. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next is Fred Shilson.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for having me. My name is Fred Shilson. I am the recording secretary for QP Local 79. I want to talk about a couple of things that have come up in the series of budgets that affect I'm a representative of about 20,000 people who work at the City of Toronto, including Bridgepoint Health and Toronto Community Housing. I grew up downtown. My father works for the city in solid waste. He's been a 30-year employee of the City of Toronto and still remains so. So as a result, when I was younger, we couldn't afford to have childcare. So my mother dropped out of the workforce to turn around and take care of me and my two other siblings, which, as you can imagine, is a choice that she made, and she's very happy that she made it, but it was a choice she was forced to make because she couldn't afford it. Myself, I'm getting married in May, and I'm looking at this, looking out for a couple years, and I'm thinking, you know what? I won't be able to afford childcare. I'm a support C, which is my full-time position. I'm booked off. What that means is I'm one of your largest employee groups, and if I can't afford childcare at the City of Toronto as a city employee with a good job, how are other people going to do it? These are highly trained people who do the work, who enjoy doing it, and it's a problem. We need to increase the number of subsidies that we have, increase the funding going to it. We have 51 licensed childcare centers across the city. I know there's a bunch more in the works, but based on the way the funding has been doled out in the next 10 years, no guarantee that that's going to continue. I grew up downtown in the East End. I had a lot of friends who lived in Regent and Blake Street. I spent a lot of time in Regent playing baseball, running around in Regent Park, and I actually didn't realize till I was older. My buddy lived in a Toronto Community Housing building in Leslieville. Your long-term financial plan actually calls for divesting to not-for-profit groups, Toronto Community Housing, up to $8 billion worth. You're creating a condition because you're offsetting it until 2021, a lot of your capital repairs. My members are concerned that these units are going to close, and it's creating a whirlwind effect when you combine that with what's happening in the shelter system. These two divisions, well, Toronto Housing isn't a division, but they work hand in hand to ensure that people have a place to go, that they have access to safe housing, that they have somewhere, when it's minus 20 outside, that they're not sleeping on the street. We need to continue investing in this, in the social infrastructure of the city, or it's going to start to crumble. And that's our moral ground. We're city employees. We're here to do the work, but we're also here to pressure and let you know that, you know what, we're concerned. These pressures are continuing, and it doesn't seem like City Council has the will to make the change that they need to make. I grew up going to Matty Eckler too. Matty Eckler, when I was a kid, it used to be Pape Rec Center. I grew up there. I was there every day. I actually lived across the street from it. I learned to swim. I actually was my first job at the city was actually a counselor in training at Jimmy Simpson at the rec camp. One of the things that we're very concerned about is that there's 7,500 less spaces in this budget. These are 75 less spaces for people to access, to get access to publicly funded parks and recreation services. My members provide a lot of those services in all areas of Toronto, and we want to I see that continuing. There's $164 million in capital repair to parks, forestry, and recreation that is currently unfunded. What's going to happen to these parks and what's going to happen to these facilities? Are they going to go fallow? Are we going to start closing rec centers? My members are messaging me often and a lot to tell me that these are concerns that they have, and they want City Council to take it seriously. So just to wrap it up, we want you to invest, not divest. What seems to be happening is that City of Toronto wants to get out of some of these games. There was a briefing note that came out in February 2018 that said that the City of Toronto wanted the province to take over long-term care and childcare, with the city continuing to provide the services, but the province to fund them. Reg Paul actually said the other day, he's in charge of long-term care, he's the GM, actually stated that if the state of good repair backlog is pushed any farther, the upgrading of 5 of your facilities, which are located across the city, may be put at jeopardy. These spaces need to get upgraded because they're frankly not acceptable. We have members who work there on night shifts, for example, who sometimes are responsible for up to 64 residents. If there is a fire, only the ambulatory residents would be the ones getting out, frankly. So again, we want you to invest, not divest. That includes soft services, my membership. We're frankly tired of taking the hits on our backs for a 0% budget increase. That's a 2% cut. And we do want you to invest in the hardcore facilities, the infrastructure upgrades, the facility upgrades, keep up the state of good repair so we can continue providing the services that we need to.
Thank you. Councilor Carroll?
You got to long-term care facilities towards the end of that, and I'm really kind of focused there because what's starting to come out of the woodwork is here we are dealing with affordable housing, and some people think of the long-term care actually is affordable housing for some people. Their only option is to go there. And so we're, by not investing in all of these things equally, we're now starting to compromise those services. We need to repair and rebuild those centers, but we're also being told by our new provincial partners we need to double the size of those centers. And so we should be actually taking advantage of that opportunity, shouldn't we? You need to invest in expansion, and while you're doing that, you can also invest in improvement. And then people who should be looking for housing would not be thinking, oh, I'm 70, I'm just going to say I need long-term care.
Correct. I think this is an opportunity for the City of Toronto to take advantage of. I'm actually from long-term care. It's actually my base division. I come out of Castleview Witchwood Towers, which is one of your first one to go down.
Yeah.
Actually came from the old Kipling before that got torn down, so I moved to Castleview. But they're looking at moving that and merging it onto the George Street revitalization, where you're going to have a men's shelter combined with the new name for the long-term care center they're putting on top. That won't remove the need for the services in the area. This is an opportunity for the City of Toronto to take advantage of and expand rapidly. Even your own employee group is aging quite rapidly, and they're going to need places to go. And frankly, long-term care has a great standard of providing that care, but if the facilities aren't there, there's nowhere else for them to go, frankly.
Are you aware that in terms of offering to partner with other orders of government and ramp that up, we actually could afford to do it with probably without raising your taxes by that much, by keeping our property taxes low, people are focused on what that means to the operating budget. But in actual fact, it kind of keeps the debt ceiling low too, artificially. We're actually at a point where on a debt per capita basis, if we went bankrupt tomorrow, it'd be less than $2,000 per ratepayer account to fix that problem, which means we could take on a little more debt and rebuild those homes right now.
I would definitely love that. My members would 100% support that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Miguel Avila Velarde.
So, welcome to Budget 2019. I call it the gravy train of 2019. Gravy train. Why I call it the gravy train? Because we are about to hire more TTC fair inspectors, 45 of them, 22 enforcement officers, and 3 administrative support officers included in the mix. So it makes around 70 new staff for the TTC at the cost of 10 cents more at the fair. I receive a 1% increase on my ODSP, and that money is essential for me to live on. I never, in my entire activist life, social activist life, apply for funds to increase the number of community safety unit officers, which is happening in Toronto Community Housing. Last month at the Toronto Police Services, the request to hire 160 community safety unit officers was approved. Yes, but at the last TCAC board meeting, they approved only 60, which they're going to be direct to some neighbors of my community where I live, which will not help us to solve some of the problems that we have with some of our buildings in terms of CCTV cameras. CCTV cameras are missing in several buildings. We all take pride about Regent Park revitalization. We all take pride about the Alexander Park revitalization. We're making sure that we have cameras on each floor so that we have safety for our seniors, safety for our young. Let's see about the implications for the Toronto Police Services. We are about to hire 300 more special constables. We are going to have more, what I call it, sunshine list employees by the City of Toronto. So that's what I call it, the gravy train of 2019, because we are giving all these departments more staff to be hired in 2019, when many organizations here that are providing services for the less needy in terms of arts, in terms of healing, in terms of dancing, et cetera, et cetera. All these communities are providing a better service. But the problem is that we have a gravy train. So that gravy train, which is the Toronto Police budget, the TTC budget, the TCSC budget, will result in pressures that will eliminate or reduce the operating budget of these communities that are begging for cash. Last year, the Toronto Firefighters Union, I'm looking at an inspector over there, they got an increase of 3.25 in the collective union agreement for the next 5 years. The EMS guy came here asking the same, more money. So we're giving away money like crazy without having any control, because what? We have a gravy train. So we had to put priorities on the table, people. It's not about increasing the number of sunshine list employees. It's about making good choices that will benefit our community, like the youth initiative plan for the city in Regent Park. You probably hear a lot of my members of my community coming to you to speak about this important matter. Opportunities for the youth, so that they can escape to be caught into this net of violence, gun violence, etc., you want to call it. It's a result of years and years and years of neglect in our communities. And as a result, what are we doing? We are going to increase more police. That's the solution. That is gravy train. And we need to put an end to this gravy train because really we are not putting our communities first. We just put in the pockets of the union guys ahead of our needs. Thank you so much, and enjoy your gravy train.
Thank you, Miguel. Next is Kevin Curry. Welcome. You'll have 5 minutes.
So I'll be speaking to the budget item related to the Toronto Parking Authority, and more specifically Bike Share, who was requested to report through the budget process on their status. I've also submitted more detailed comments. I've been a business operator for 26 years, operating bicycle sales, service, and rental company in Toronto's waterfront. I've looked to coexist since the inception of Bike Share, but recently, last couple of years, with its expansion, inclusive of a Bike Share location no more than 200 meters from my store, that impacts my business, targeting tourists and visitors to the waterfront, and recently free bike days, and the most recent bike rate change no longer allows me to be competitive. In contrast, the city's 10-year bike plan is underfunded, under-budgeted, supports a broader constituency and business sustainability. This needs the utmost support. The bike share budget comes close to consumes almost $20 million, representing a significant draw on civic resources, targeting public reserve funds, not necessarily coming out of the capital or operating budgets, but still a significant impact to taxpayers. Bike sharing is now a multi-billion-dollar industry segment of the cycling industry. Has big players, Uber, Lyft, to be more specific. And I bring forward an example of Seattle, who essentially abandoned a similar system, if not the same system that Toronto's been investing in, opted to tender out to multiple companies, and in overall, turning it into a more of a success story, a larger representation of bikes, including e-bikes, and now we're seeing the new potential for e-push scooters and such, and they're charging a permit fee, which actually makes it a revenue generator. More specifically, when the Parking Authority was handed over the bike share in a bankrupt state and $10 million, they were given a $5 million reserve fund. Now they seem to be coming forward and asking for well over $5 million to go back in time and recoup lost dollars and deficits. I don't understand how that was accounted for in those years, but in real terms, if they were already absorbed within the TPA financial reports, there's no reason for the city to pilfer existing reserve funds to support that. The financial statements, which I have attached, the segments regarding, you see a consistent drawdown against the debt and the reserve fund, and then it all of a sudden stops in 2017. I'd like to point out sponsorship seems to be a critical item on the bike share agenda. They failed to garner sponsorship, and yet they continue to put it in as a significant funding element, which has been their greatest downfall. It's not based in reality. Seeing some of the institutions here that are coming and asking for support and have a need, sponsorship is not an endless supply, it's finite. I'd ask each councillor to reconcile which one of local arts and culture programs, street festivals, major or not, would you see be depleted by bike share garnering anywhere as close to the $1.5 million? The plan also looks to divert almost $12 million from the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program, which would be much better suited towards being allocated 100% towards the cycling program. This committee shouldn't take the bike share request at face value. Are 2 million trips really that significant if you benchmark it against tens of millions of regular cycling trips? Casual observation of my cycling is that general traffic, cycling traffic is much higher than what bike share represents.
We'll have to wrap up, please.
And in closing, I would suggest that there is a motion before the committee on its Wednesday agenda in regards to the Richmond Adelaide cycling track in relation to a particular bike share location. I would suggest that to have the proper context, you should be requesting a report from the General Manager of Transportation to provide valid context and the TTC. Thank you.
Next, I just wanted, we have about 25 minutes left. We have to do a break at 5 o'clock for an hour, so there's about, looks like it'd be about 12, 14 people left. We're not going to be able to get to everybody by 5 o'clock, unfortunately. I think so for clerks and all that. But, so anyway, there's Irene Leslie, yes. Mabuba Honorarian, Aaron Burke, Rachel Janer, and Lynn Adamson. Those, I'm hoping to get to those individuals before 5 o'clock. So we'll start with Irene.
Yes.
You can begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to address the proposed increases in the budget with a focus on solid waste management. My concern is while the city is stating an increase is required to cover rising costs, I don't believe enough is being done to monitor and, if necessary, enforce compliance of residential garbage disposal. My issue is the lack of bag tag compliance and or what I call underbinning. I live west of Yonge Street and therefore am serviced by GFL. If I use my street as an example, there are approximately 200 houses on my street. Every 2 weeks when garbage is picked up, I can consistently drive up my street and see garbage bins with bags piled high on their bin with no bag tags on them and the lid fully open. According to the City of Toronto website, and I quote, "Excess garbage beyond what fits in your bin with the lid closed must be bagged, tagged, and set out beside your garbage bin for collection," end quote. I've observed GFL simply pick up the excess garbage. There have even been instances where the bin is being mechanically lifted into the truck, and because the bin is overflowing, the bags fall to the ground, break open, and we have garbage on the street. I used the current cost of a bag tag of $5 for my calculations. Hypothetically, and please understand this is hypothetically, I used my street and said each garbage collection week, there could be a minimum of 2 bag tags collected on the street, or 1% of the households. The calculation would then be as follows: $10 each garbage week for a total of $260 per year. I took a calculation of 7,000 streets, since I live west of Yonge, and I looked up on the website and it said Toronto has approximately 14,000 streets. So 7,000 streets of garbage pickup. This would mean $1,820,000 in revenue. This is very hypothetical, but I hope you see the point I'm trying to make. I also believe GFL's compensation, part of it is weight of garbage they pick up. Therefore, we are paying extra for the excess bags without recovering some of the costs through either bag tags or using the correct size bin to accommodate the garbage being generated. In closing, I would like to see better monitoring and enforcement of excess garbage being placed at the curb. Any additional costs this might incur would be more than offset by the revenue generated and or the reduction in costs paid to GFL. I don't believe taxpayers should have to subsidize those households that break the rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
If I may, I was just noticing to my colleagues and letting them know, you're totally right. And they both represent areas west of Yonge. I live east. I'm west of Yonge. We can put out whatever we want
Yes,
in front of our house. GFL is going to take it all.
yes.
Not that I would do that, but like anything.
Don't you
Extra
have a lot of
bags sitting at the
diapers at your
side.
house?
Yeah, I just leave diapers strewn all over the lawn. They come, they just don't want to generate a complaint.
I think that's it, and it's not the collectors, because I see them, and you know what, they're racing up the street,
Yeah.
trying to collect as quickly as they can. But from my perspective, if they have a pickup truck going up and down every so often, if there's a supervisor there, should they not be looking at those bins? And I've seen people actually tie bags together so that they'll saddle bag them over their bins so that they don't have to put a bag tag on them.
Yep, I think you're totally right. I don't know what the language could be, but I think it's certainly, underbinning is a great way to describe it.
Underbinning in the sense that if you need a large bin, but you have a medium bin and you consistently just put more bags on, you're underbinning. But I guess I thought there was a mechanism for monitoring in the sense that somebody, and I don't know if it's city staff in a 311 vehicle that come along and say, oops, you know what? Sorry, this is too much on your bin. There is a sticker they put on it and it gets set down and I'm sorry, we won't collect it. I don't know what the solution is, but I see it just consistently.
Right now, it's the collectors that put the sticker on your bin and say, we're just not taking it, sorry.
They don't have time.
But that's not working out west of Yonge.
Yeah, I firmly believe we're missing a great deal of revenue.
Thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Yes.
Yes, I want to thank you for that term, underbinning. We were warned of this when we outsourced. There's a great deal of research out there that says that if you are, if you're looking for a set of practices, and that includes the residents using those practices and keeping according to policy, that outsourced workers are not going to be able to do it for you. Are you suggesting that what we do is make sure that there are more city supervisors of the contract showing up there? We don't have city solid waste curbside collectors over there, but there should be someone who is in charge of monitoring GFL.
Yes, and I appreciate that they cannot do every street every time, but I've never seen a spot check happen on my street or in my area, in my general area. I've never seen anyone come along and take a look at these piled high garbage bins and do anything about it. So yeah, perhaps it has to be city staff. And I appreciate that, you know what, maybe the collector doesn't want to be a villain here. He's just trying to get it done as quickly as possible. And you know, I see these folks, they're working till 7, 8 o'clock at night sometimes. They may not have the opportunity to get out of the cab, put something on the bag and remove it from the bin.
Right, and their boss will be compensated anyway, because you're right, we do figure out what we owe them by weighing the truck.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm going to remember this when we get to wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mabube, honorarian. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, correctly. Yeah.
Thank you.
I know it's difficult for everybody. Good afternoon, all the councillors. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak and listening to this deputation. My name is Mabube Honarian. I am a documentary filmmaker with over 18 years of experience making TV series and one-off documentaries. I am here as a resident of Toronto for 12 years now, although I was in Canada 35 years ago and my first son was born here. Then I went to the UK and I studied my bachelor and master. I came back to Canada in 2006 as a new immigrant with lots of dreams and a passion, as a lot of people do. I started to get to know people in the film industry the first year I came here, that is in 2006, and tried to make connections with other filmmakers and organizations like Documentary Organization of Canada, which I later became a member. Then I joined the Academy of Canadian Cinema and Television, where I also served as a jury member for a couple of years, and I became a member. As time passed, it was time for me to start working, so I tried to apply for a couple of funds in order to make a film here. I wasn't successful. And surprisingly, still, after 12 years, I haven't been able to get funding to make my film. Even though I have been very successful producer and director in the Middle East and Europe, I have managed many projects as president or festival manager. I opened my own film production company in Toronto in 2007, and I started a couple of projects out of my own pocket. Meanwhile, still searching to get some possible funding. When I met other immigrant filmmakers, I realized that they also have the same issue. They had decided to do other jobs to survive, as I did myself too. Although this wasn't me and it wasn't my passion, which I had studied for many years and had years of experience and successful international achievements. Surprisingly, during all these years, I have been and still am receiving so many emails and resumes asking for jobs to work for me and my company. But how could I offer them jobs when I even couldn't get funding for my own projects? I got to the point where I must do something about it, so I started creating a group for immigrant filmmakers and media artists. So I thought maybe making a platform could actually help gather all these people together, and then they can actually show their works, and then maybe that would be a way to get involved in the film industry in here. Such a network could also make them to integrate with other colleagues from diverse cultural backgrounds in a positive atmosphere and to give them aspiration to start a new project. I had great responses from people. I found out that there are so many like me that are facing the same barriers and they feel the need for such a network. But for how long could I continue this effort with one hand where there is no support from the other? I know there are various organizations and services for newcomers to adjust to their new society, even for visual artists, opportunities to gather, connect, and get financial support to create their works. But unfortunately, none for immigrant and refugee film and media professionals. That is until a few weeks ago when I became knowledgeable of this, given the opportunity to a public deputation through the North York Arts Organization, which I really appreciated. So now I would like to bring you to, your attention and ask the respected committee members to consider new opportunities and funds for immigrant and refugee filmmakers and media professionals. And I truly appreciate your support in this regard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Aaron Burke. Aaron Burke. Rachel Janer. Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to read my deputation today. My name is Rachel Janer, and I am a paramedic. I've also been a citizen of Toronto for 44 years, East York until high school, North York until university, and many homes in the downtown, midtown areas since then. I love this city, and thank you for what you do daily to keep it one of the most diverse, beautiful, and enviable cities that it is. On January 31st at City Hall, my colleagues and I were recognized for our first place standing 2 years in a row in the International Trauma Life Support Competition, and for taking home the 2018 George Eliadis Award, recognizing the highest level of professionalism and leadership in trauma care, to quote Mayor Tory. With that background in mind and my 16 years of providing emergency care, I hope that you will appreciate my concern in hearing that we may only be gaining 12 more paramedics this year. I commend the efforts that our leaders in management and our union have strived to accomplish and have accomplished in dealing with much needed staffing since 2003. After 35 years of a status quo system, things were shaken up. We firstly inherited a schedule change in 2013 and secondly created part-time positions. The impact of these two moves alone have affected morale negatively. Though some other paramedic services may find it possible to implement some of our schedules and employ part-time paramedics, I can only share how these two changes have affected our service, in my opinion. My shifts are a minimum of 12 hours, sometimes as long as 14 hours due to before or end of shift overtime because there is no relief. The shifts are from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., then vice versa for night shifts. Now, understanding that, I ask you to imagine the following pattern in a 3-week rotation. I work 4 night shifts in a row, 2 days off, 3 day shifts in a row, 1 day off, 3 night shifts in a row, 2 days off, then 4 day shifts. There's 1 week off, but it is left for catching up on friends and family time, cleaning up, and other errands, then finding the time to do any non-work related activities if you still have the energy. Then the whole 4-week cycle begins again. It gets harder to feel like there is balance, especially when you get older and friends' priorities turn to their now non-single life realities. It honestly feels like you schedule your life in 12 weeks for the entire year. I have become more of a recluse because I am simply exhausted. The schedule was something looked at to improve short staffing, but we simply needed more paramedics. The gain by not hiring was met with the loss of the paramedics' health and well-being. In this day and age of being hypervigilant in the world, having part-timers can make that feeling of knowing who your coworkers are more difficult, both for the part-timer and the full-timer. We probably spend more time with our work partners than we do with our own families. Temporary spots were always expected when first being hired, but having the same shift made transitioning into the work family much easier because you knew there was an end in sight eventually, and you knew who your people were, your particular color code tribe. Meeting a different work partner every shift indefinitely is not exactly the welcome environment that you would want to create, lacking a much-needed support system. The camaraderie that helps keep morale high on those extremely challenging days also takes a lot longer to forge. What we think we are gaining by offering a part-time position for cost savings, we may be losing so much more in longevity of expertise due to the revolving door for those seeking full-time opportunities elsewhere. By simply not having enough paramedics on the road, which is still tangible despite having part-timers, there is a negative impact on the paramedics' performance. In light of much publicized mental health awareness, I am sure you would agree that preventing an added stress factor such as short staffing should be a concern prioritized and actioned. I actually think that the public would be impressed to realize the great service that we do provide with what is currently budgeted. Please consider allocating more of the 2019 budget towards hiring more than 12 paramedics, as my colleague and union exec suggested 100, possibly anticipating attrition and increasing continuing demands for calls. Return to a full-time only paramedic service and improve the schedule to support our health, to maintain the excellent standard of care that the public expect and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thanks for your deputation. I'm sure you have had a look at, you've probably had a look in, or I know that the local unit has at our paramedic services budget. There are a few additional paramedics in the budget. Do we have any way of knowing, we are only presented the budget in terms of FTEs. Do we have any way of knowing if these new positions will be filled by part-timers or full-timers?
I would not be the person to answer that because I'm not on management or the union. I do know that it's hard to figure it out because we do have other programs that try to prevent people from going to the hospital when they call 911, like our community reach by emergency medical services, CREMS program, to prevent people to go to the hospital if they don't need to.
Right.
So I know our management's trying to implement ways so that we don't have to keep using us inefficiently. So I guess it would be difficult to determine that right now.
So unless we ask the question, we don't even know if that will be done by part-timers.
Correct. And so when I heard that it was 12, I thought, I don't even think that includes anyone retiring or anyone who gets injured, because that's kind of part and parcel with their job.
Is retirement, maybe you're on the younger end of the scale, but we did have some fairly mature people who really started the paramedic service division in the city. Is that maybe part of the challenge? We said, yes, let's introduce a little bit of part-time, but now there are 200 part-timers because that's how we're filling retirements?
I don't think so. I think the idea was to sort of have cost savings with having in lieu of benefits, and I understand that concept of thinking. But when you think about an actual human who comes into work and then thinks that this is not where they're going to stay forever, like, because I'm a lifer, shall we say, then they might not see past 2 years. And I don't think you want a caregiver to have that attitude. Like, I take great pride in what I do, right? And so if someone thinks, well, I won't be here in 2 years, really don't care. You know, it might develop that kind of attitude in someone who is part-time, per se, because they don't feel they're supported the way we should support them.
Okay.
Like, I am a full-timer, so I can only tell you by what I hear from the people that I see swing in and out of my station.
Well, all I can tell you is it's been kind of a year for my family. I've called paramedics 4 times. Thank you for your service.
And they still do a great job, trust me, the ones I've
They
met.
sure
it's
do.
Just, you know,
They sure
on
do.
the
I've witnessed
inside.
it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. So the last deputy before the dinner break will be Lynn Adamson.
Thank you very much for hearing me speak. I'm speaking on behalf of Climate Fast, and we're speaking in support of budgeting for climate action in the City of Toronto. We support the Transform TO budget ask for new and enhanced of 1.458 million, I believe it is. We also note this is not as much as was originally projected for this year, and this does cause us some concern as climate action is extremely urgent and all programs should be proceeding as quickly as possible. We also note that there are many budget areas that need increased funding if we are to achieve the goals of a massive reduction in carbon emissions. It is our responsibility as a city to do our part of staying under the 1.5 Celsius temperature rise. That's our Paris commitment. These include funding for bike lanes. We are currently underspending and are under-ambitious, and this is showing up in poor results with Vision Zero. We note that City of Montreal spends $9 per person on bike lane infrastructure, whereas Toronto budgets $6 per person. In contrast, New York City, which is making great progress on safer streets, budgets $38 per person. And we know that I think we had a 1,000% increase in cycling on Richmond and Adelaide, so we know the addition of bike lanes gets people on the streets. So building the right infrastructure, like transit systems, pedestrian areas, and bike lanes, will encourage active transport, such as cycling, walking, and public transit. According to notes from Dr. Thomas Lavasvoboda of Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, the resulting active lifestyles could result in 25 to 30% reductions in breast cancer, colon cancer, stroke, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and depression. If we want to get people out of their cars, reduce congestion, and increase the health and community benefits of active transportation, then we need to make decisions to build the safe street design that is required to achieve these goals. We note that the future of North Yonge Street requires the imagination and vision to design it for active transportation, such as the reimagined Yonge design would include bike lanes and wider sidewalks. We've got to make our planning decisions match what we're trying to do with Transform TO. It's not enough to just have Transform TO. We got to vision it into our city planning. We also need to retain local control of and provide sufficient funding support for TTC. If we want to encourage a modal shift toward transit use, we need to keep transit affordable and improve service levels. We also need to ensure that evidence-based planning is used to make optimal use of the funding available for building new transit lines. Deep retrofitting of existing building stock is a must for reaching our carbon emission reduction targets. This means the city must invest in addition to attracting federal funds and hopefully some provincial funds as well. We know those were cut under the cap and trade when that was canceled, but that cannot be permitted to derail this essential work, which will also help to employ young people, provide job training, and reduce poverty in the city, and help to provide the affordable housing that so many currently underhoused or on the street need. We note that the Transform TO program has limited funds allocated to community partnerships. Climate Fast is currently working with Green Neighbours Network and Toronto Green Community on a pilot project funded by TAF in one neighborhood in Scarborough and one in Etobicoke. The funding for this project is coming from TAF. That's because Transform TO didn't have the money for those kinds of programs, but it should get that money because we want to engage all parts of the city in building low carbon neighborhoods. So we'd like to see the funding for that work expanded, and it would help us respond to the urgency of the situation. We need everyone on board for that. Finally, we would like to speak on behalf of long-term planning for the city's finances. It's our understanding that councillors have deferred discussion and decision-making on options that would increase the city's revenue stream. We see it as urgent that the city increase revenue. We cannot build the city that we need Toronto to be without the necessary funds. We recommend implementation of the vehicle registration fee as well as cost increases in parking fees and other measures to reduce incentives for driving and encourage the transition to active transportation. To encourage EVs, these vehicles could be exempt from the vehicle registration tax. We all need to step up and do everything we can as individuals, communities, and at the government level if we are to respond to the absolute urgency of the crisis. We all know about the melting glaciers, the acidifying oceans, and the extreme weather and flooding that we are already experiencing here in Toronto. I will be almost 80 by the time 2030 is here, so it is not for me that these changes must be made. It is our responsibility to invest in them for our children and those who are young adults now. It is only these next few years that we can make that difference. The city has made a start, and we must actively build on that start to become climate leaders. Our youth deserve no less from us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's now 5 o'clock. We'll take an hour recess. We'll begin with finishing up the deputants who we didn't get to so far. At this point, there's about 8 people left, so we'll begin with you at 6 p.m., and then we'll continue with the list of the evening deputants. Thank you.